Hot Springs Village Inside Out is a closer look at the greatness of Hot Springs Village, Arkansas, and the surrounding areas. People, places, experiences. Hot Springs Village is one of the most beautiful places on earth. Join me, Randy Cantrell, and my co-host, Dennis Simpson, as we engage in weekly conversations to explore Hot Springs Village Inside Out. Today's show is brought to you by Central Arkansas's favorite radio station, KVRE. Find them on the dial at 92.9 FM. Stream them live at kvre.com. RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village, the award-winning RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village, is the largest real estate office inside the village with over 30 full-time agents and support staff. Visit them to learn more about this beautiful place to solve your real estate needs. Call them today at 1-800-364-9007 or find them online at explorehsv.com. They are RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village at 1-800-364-9007 or online at explorehsv.com.
The most shocking thing that's happened for, some time to our program and to what we do is the federal money flowing out of Washington. It has gone into the school districts. So much money has been given to schools that it's virtually evaporated the market that we had of providing students with computers.
For free.
K through 12 students specifically.
Yeah, but for free you were providing.
It has been remarkable to me. And in fact, it's like I said, it's virtually dried up that market.
Let me get this straight. So the government is out giving you, is what I hear right now.
Big time. Yeah.
Well, let me introduce everybody that's listening. I'm Dennis Simpson. This is Bob McCleskey. Bob and I go back probably the better part of a decade. A fantastic guy with a wonderful heart for giving. Bob, you were, and before we get into it real quick, you were actually president of the Fountain Lake School Board. Is that correct?
I was on the school board for 9 years, and that included a few years of being president. Yeah.
Well, what we're talking about today is the Computers for Kids. Bob, tell us how this works. What does it do?
The program is we basically request donations from various sources. It used to be schools and still is somewhat, but also from businesses and residents, typically people who are upgrading their computer and no longer need the one they had. And so we take that computer, we first evaluate it to see whether it will handle the latest Microsoft operating system. Well, next latest, operating system 10, Windows 10. Yeah. And if so, then we will put it through that sequence of events. Otherwise, we actually install an alternative operating system called Linux Mint. That's every bit as good as Windows 10, but people don't know about it.
And a lot faster. Yeah.
Okay, and faster, and particularly on underpowered equipment. So then what we do is we ready those computers. So it's a complete system. If it's a laptop, of course, that's a computer or laptop with adapter. In the case of a desktop, it's all the components: keyboard, mouse, monitor, speakers if necessary, so that it's a total system. And in the case of all-in-one, it's that unit plus a keyboard and mouse. Ethernet if they're going to be connecting directly to a router. Otherwise, if it's wireless, we don't provide Ethernet. But so the recipients of the computers have a complete operating computer system, and we. In the case of all the Microsoft-enabled computers, we keep pretty complete records because it's required due to the fact that we are a Microsoft registered refurbisher, which lets us buy that both Windows 10 and Office at incredible discounts.
Like
Without that, we wouldn't have a program.
Yeah. Well, and and I'm not giving away anything because I'm familiar with the program, but typically Office is going to be under $20 kind of thing, right? In that ballpark.
To try a third of that.
A third of that. A third of that.
Yeah. So
in the shortest version possible, people give you computers. You refurbish them, you make sure they're up to grade, you put the latest Microsoft software on there, and then you give them away. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, not quite. It's close.
Okay.
We do ask for a nominal donation. And the donation, if it turns out to be a Linux computer, we ask for a $10 donation.
$10, man? What do you think? People are made of money around here? Huh?
Yeah. Yes. We're minting money. If it's a Windows-enabled computer, desktop or laptop, it's going to be $20. If it's an all-in-one with Windows on it, it's going to be $30. Well, so that's and the reason for the additional $10 in the case of all-in-one is because they have speakers and they have Wi-Fi. You know, they have everything you need. Where if it's a desktop, you know that we do put speakers on it, but some of the desktop actually have sound built into the chassis, and in some cases the monitors have sound built in. So,
well, Bob, where are you calling us from today? I can see behind you. I've got a lake. You've got a storeroom. It looks like.
Well, it's actually a workroom and storeroom. We actually have 3 rooms in the Unitarian Universalist Village Church that we have occupied virtually since the church bought this facility from the Village Church of Christ,
right?
Which was 11, 12 years ago.
Yeah, it's a great building too, a great location.
Yeah, yes, and it was an incredible purchase for our church, and it was one of the best. The purchasing process was one of the most enjoyable contract negotiations I've ever been involved in. The Church of Christ people were so easy to deal with and so pleasant. So I'd like to give them a lot of attaboys for that experience. Well, anyway, we have these 3 rooms that.
Let me interrupt just for 1 second. The Village Church of Christ is where the computer club holds their board meetings and some of our training, and their new building over on Balboa. They are still generous. It's not just when they negotiate for a building. I mean, they're wonderful people, and once again, more pats on the back because they're very, very village minded and civic minded. So much like the UU. And I mean, let me ask, so you've been taking these computers in for how many years?
It's over 13 years. I started the program while I was on the school board and discovered that the obsolete or surplus computers there were being sent to Texarkana to be scrapped. And I said, there's got to be a use for those things. And I did enough research and discovered that I could become a Microsoft registered refurbisher to be able to get those licenses at incredibly inexpensive rates. And so that started it. And the first 2 years, basically all the computers we did went into the Fountain Lake school community.
Really?
And we started expanding after that to other local school districts. And basically, we placed computers in at least the 5 other than Lakeside. We have 1 or 2 in Lakeside, maybe Lake Hamilton, but most of it has gone to the other school district. Cutter Morningstar, particularly. Hot Springs School District is actually the one that has, in the last few years, gotten most of the computers that we've refurbished.
And let me come back to this real quick. Fountain Lake is the one just down at the corner of 5 and 7 because we have visitors and watchers from all over.
Yeah.
So this is the one probably you and I would say closest to Hot Springs. Okay. Then, well, it technically it's pretty close. It's down on Fox Pass, down near the bypass, where the bypass is going to be these days.
Not quite. Yeah.
Not quite. Then just north of here, we have Jesseville, which is another needy school district. Did you say, and I'm sorry if I missed it, did you say Mountain Pine? Have you used been a lot there?
Yes. Mountain Pine is one of the district. Now, we haven't done anything recently. Well, we haven't done much recently with any of them. Yeah. But prior to the pandemic, we did some work there. more at Hot Springs, particularly the Langston, what used to be Aerospace, now that they've got a different name for it, but
Yeah.
and then in the Hot Springs High School, Cutter Morning Star, and then certainly Jessieville is, again, all of this is prior to the pandemic. Although fairly recently, I sent a email encouraging, I sent it to the 5 superintendents, encouraging them to make their families aware of the availability of computers. And Cutter did the best job. They posted that on it's probably a Facebook site.
Right.
And so we ended up with 10 or 15 families that got computers from that posting. So
And you know, I'm sorry.
The big change, though, because of what's happening in the K through 12 world, is that, and in fact, prior to the pandemic, we were starting to place a lot of computers with nonprofit organizations, particularly that are doing what I think of, or what I think most people would consider adult education, which there is a great need, much more than a lot of people realize. The Cooperative Christian Ministries and Clinic is one of the big one of the organizations doing a lot of that. In fact, they have classes running, and then I think these are typically 3-month classes. And I know they have at least 1 or 2 classes going now, and they've got some scheduled. And there are other organizations that do that kind of education. So,
is that the one down on Park Street?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's one street off. You can see the sign, and to get to it is kind of, because it's a one-way street getting to their building. But yes.
Well, not only that, but the fine folks at the clinic are fantastic. We're talking about, I mean, really a heart for giving, literally a heart for giving. Let me play techie just for a moment. I'm going to take off the interviewee hat and I'm going to put on the techie hat and have them say, so I'm going to give you my computer, okay, and you're going to refurbish it and you're going to sell/give to the kids at virtually nothing. How do I know my data's secure? What are you going to do to get my stuff off there, Bob?
Okay. One of the requirements of being a Microsoft registered refurbisher is that we wipe the hard drive of every computer we receive, particularly those that are going through the Microsoft channel. We do it on all of them, frankly. So that's after the evaluation process. The second step is wiping hard drives. And so these hard drives some of them stay in the computer, some of them get pulled out and put in other computers. And if I could turn my camera around, I can show you a stack of hard drives that we pulled out. So they all get wiped. Everything removed, literally programs as well as personal data is taken off the computer. And then we're going to overwrite that space with the new Windows 10, Office, etc., or the Linux. And Linux has its own suite of software, including one called LibreOffice, which, like Microsoft Office, has all the components. In fact, it has more components in it than Microsoft Office has, at least the version that we installed, which is 2019.
Yeah, and it's basically, it comes down to being this simple. It's an open source version of Office that people have built, because Office is just, I appreciate the Microsoft people, but to buy a retail version or a business version can be astronomical. It's more than $10. How about that? I'll put it that way. It's more than $10, right?
Yeah.
So what a wonderful, I've got so many questions, Bob. Let me come back. I want to come back and ask how you got started in doing this. And I know you saw the need for it. I got that. What I wanted to know is, how did you get to the village?
Okay, let me interrupt this and say that I've lost your photo. Are you still seeing me on your?
Yeah, I'm great. I've got you, and I'm recording you fine. So
all right, then I don't
keep yakking. We're good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I had some of my career was in the technology industry. In fact, it started in what was called data processing. I worked for a small company out of Dallas called Electronic Data Systems.
Was that the guy with the big ears?
125 employees when I went to work. And when I left, there was 100 and something thousand employees. But anyway,
and for those that don't know, that's Mr. Perot, and
yeah,
the I'm all ears comment from the
yeah.
from
So
the
anyway,
presidential
even
debate.
while I was there, though, I never got involved in the kind of work that I'm doing with computers for kids. I was basically involved in management and marketing. I did work very nominally as a technician. I wrote one COBOL computer program that was in service for a long time, but anyway, then got involved in other things. So it was after I retired and got on the school board that I got interested in doing this refurbishing work, and saw a need for it, and that certainly proved to be the case over the years. It started with just me and then one or two other people, and remained pretty small until about 3 or 4 years ago. And we're now have somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 12 volunteers that work with us, that do the only 5 of us do the technical refurbishing process, and other people assist with other aspects of the program. Obviously, we have to get out in the community to get the word out. We have to maintain the records that Microsoft requires. That we have to protect the licenses that we get. Actually, we used to get it directly from Microsoft, but that's no longer true. We actually get it from another major refurbishing organization out of Kentucky. But
well, now, so you say after you retired, you make it sound like you retired and they had a place waiting for you at Hot Springs Village. Come on, Bob. What happened?
Well, my wife and I started looking for a place, a few years before we retired, before I was scheduled to retire, and discovered the village like a lot of people. Actually, we'd been coming to Hot Springs for at least 3 or 4 years before we discovered the village. And that was an accident. We were driving around. We did the circuit around Lake Washita and came down Highway 7, saw the village, pulled into the gate, and guess what? They said, if you don't have an invitation, you can't come in. So we didn't know any better. We just kept going. So it was after that one of the merchants in town made us aware of how to get into the village, and so we ended up then from that point forward, when we came to the Hot Springs area, we stayed in the village, and that went on for at least 3 or 4 years. Bought our first lot on the Cortez Golf Course, and even before we even considered building on it, we found another lot that overlooks Lake Coronado. That's where we ended up building what amounts to a tree house, or a house in the trees. So, like where you have a lake, we have trees that in the wintertime, we can see the lake pretty clearly. That's Coronado, but in the summertime, we can't see the lake.
Something tells me you're on the north side. Am I close?
Yes, we're on the north side of Lake Coronado. Yeah,
the steep side, as we call it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Bob, how many PCs have you put into private hands over the years, you think?
It's exceeding 1,300 at this point in time. I did an inventory of that a few months ago, and it was at 1,200 at the time. And more recently, we've added enough, put out enough, replaced enough that it's in excess of 1,300.
Well, two things I need to follow up with. Number one, how do we get in touch with you if we want to donate, or if we know somebody in need? And number two, what do you need? Do you need more volunteers? Do you need more PCs?
We would love to have more volunteers, but the number one need that we have is people to help us locate people, particularly adults, or could be school children, that need a computer, that don't have one and would benefit from having one. And I think of nonprofit organizations. If any of your listeners are working with a nonprofit organization that assists adults or families, and that family doesn't have a personal computer, we'd like to be able to help them out. So that's the biggest need. People do donate computers. They come in not daily, but a few a week that we get, and they will eventually be refurbished in place. But the biggest need now is people who need computers rather than us needing them.
Because the government's competing with you. Who knew, right? Who knew?
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Trying to get the government to help you out and assist, and then they overrun you. I tell you what, but I think for me, and I know for a lot of the villagers, we just can't stand waste. And I know that's what triggered. I know you enough to know that's what triggered your button on the school board. You were like, you're doing what with them? You're throwing them away.
Yeah. And that was just actually, we don't keep them out of the dump, but we delay their
arrival,
their expiry. So and they do serve, obviously, anybody that doesn't have a personal computer in this day and age is behind. They need help. And the computers, as anybody that has a computer and knows about Google and YouTube, those are the two greatest inventions beyond the internet. The computers and the internet are great inventions, but Google and YouTube are right up there with them.
I agree. We have a friend here on the lake, Rick Marshall, who like-minded. You need to meet him. He's a great guy. He's actually a realtor who specializes in lakefront properties. Wonderful guy. And he made note that they went to Puerto Rico and basically set themselves up as missionaries in Puerto Rico. And there's basically two schools of Puerto Rico. There's Puerto Rico that says, oh yeah, we're part of the America. Yeah. And the other part of Puerto Rico says in very broken English or very clear Spanish, who wants the gringos, and they realized that to help people get up the socioeconomic ladder, that they needed to learn English. So Liz and Rick started a Spanish to English school to help the Puerto Rican people learn English so they could be in a service industry or get a phone job or whatever. And it was a tremendous effort. Well, by the same token, we assume you speak English, I speak English. We can speak and we take that for granted. Well, I have a computer, you have a computer, everybody has a. No, I guess they don't, do they now, Bob?
Right.
So that's my point being of telling that story is that if you don't have a computer in today's day and age, and you don't have office skills, or you don't have literally office software skills, you can be at a huge disadvantage. So this can bring some lower income families up the ladder a little ways, can it, Bob?
Absolutely. And along those lines, we have not using a highfalutin term, but we have a working relationship. And some people call it strategic alliance now. It's a working relationship with a retired minister from the Christ of the Hills Methodist Church, one Dr. Walter Bubba Smith.
Bubba.
If you haven't met Bubba, I mean, he's a great guy. He's on the board of Promise for Haiti. And I like to plug what he's doing because it's a North Carolina-based organization that supports a medical clinic, and I think it's 15 schools. And the first year of the pandemic, I think, was when he took about 50 computers down there. And earlier this year, he shipped about 15, and then I think he's going later this year. And because we received a bunch of their quasi ebooks. They're small tablets with a keyboard and docking station that we recently felt heir to, 100 of them, and those make great Linux computers. So we're hoping that Dr. Smith will take as many as he can haul. That in, I think, November he's going down there. So we're starting to refurbish those things. Ironically, they came with Windows 10 on them, and they're so underpowered. They have a 32 gigabyte hard drive, a 2 gigabyte RAM, and I think they're 1.1 processor. I mean, they're really underpowered.
They would have struggled with Windows 7, much less anything else.
They had started with Windows 7, then they upgraded to Windows 10. And they must have replaced the organization, which I won't mention, upgraded them, no doubt. So
you know what they did? They came with Factory 7, and it worked okay.
Yeah.
And they decided to upgrade to 10, and they turned them into trash because they were literally useless.
That's probably what happened.
Well, let me tell you,
so
the Haiti,
those are a bunch of those are going down to
Haiti. Promise for Haiti. Wow.
Promise for Haiti. Yeah.
And let me and we can help you get in touch with Dr. Bubba too. He's a wonderful guy. Couldn't ask for a nicer guy. But I wanted to make note. Heard an article on NPR. Oh, gee, it's been maybe 10 years ago. But they were talking about after the earthquake, they were trying to set up water stations so they could simply just give water away from the UN. And because this was a very pressing issue, and the governmental issues, I'll truncate it greatly, but the governmental issues that were involved in, they could not, the UN could not secure ownership of a 1/4 acre lot to know whose name it's in, so that they could put the water there. I mean, it's such a convoluted and frankly messed up system that it's difficult. Ownership is difficult there. Land ownership and many other issues are difficult that way. So to be able to go in and to directly inject computers in people's hands, huge. I get it. I really get it. Tell us how we could contact you, Bob. What's the best way to connect with Computers for Kids?
Okay. I'd say the best way, we have a website. It's actually a web page on a website that it enables people to either donate a computer or request a computer. And it's uuvc.org/C4K.
Okay, so UU as in Universalist Unitarian Village
Church.
.org as in nonprofit /C4 computers, the letter 4 or the number 4 K as in kids.
And that's the best way, that you can send us an email, which is c4k@uuvc.org. Either of those work. So we have a telephone number, but that's long and
Well, you can find it on the website.
It goes to an answering machine. It's not my cell phone, fortunately, but anyway, those are the two best ways for people to contact us.
Well, I want to bring something up that may or may not be clear to the people in the village and outside the village, because that's one of the things I want to convey, and that is that the Universalist Unitarian outside of the village doesn't always chat with the Church of Christ, and the Church of Christ don't always talk with the Methodists, and the Methodists don't always work with the Baptists. In the village, it's different. It really is. I know of one gentleman that works for you, or works with you, I think, or who promotes you, that you may not even know, who's Jewish, who loves what you do at the UUCC church, and then he turns around and helps other churches distribute them. It literally is how it should be, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, we do have non-church members who are involved in the program, so it so happens most of them are, but not all of them. Which is not surprising at all. Yeah.
Well, as my Southern Baptist training would lead me to say, I think you're doing the Lord's work, Bob.
Well, I don't think of it that way, but hey, we're helping people, and if that's the Lord's work, then I guess we're doing the Lord's work.
Sounds wonderful. Bob, thanks for joining us today. Once again, Hot Springs Village Inside Out, Bob McCleskey, Computers for Kids here in Hot Springs Village. If you want to donate, we'll have that link below. If you know somebody in need and who could help distribute this, Bob, you'd be more than happy to assist them too, right?
Absolutely. Please. Yep. Thank you, Dennis.
Bob, been a pleasure as always. We got to go to lunch soon, okay?
You too.
Okay. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Hot Springs Village Inside Out, a podcast where Hot Springs Village, Arkansas is the star. Please subscribe to the podcast. You can do that by visiting our website, hsvinsideout.com, and tell a friend.